Today we're trying to paint a portrait of a poet, William Butler Yeats, who was really caught between two giant, conflicting ideas about what art is supposed to be in a world that's on fire. On one hand, he was this visionary prophet, and on the other, a quiet observer. And, figuring out that tension is, I think, the key to understanding our own wild times.
So let's just dive right in with the big question, the one that sits at the heart of this whole thing. When everything is in crisis, what is an artist supposed to do? Do they get on a soapbox and shout? Or do they retreat into their work and just be quiet? This was the exact dilemma that haunted W.B. Yeats a century ago, and honestly, it feels more real today than ever.
You've probably heard these lines before. They are some of the most famous in all of English poetry, written way back in 1919. And for Yeats, this wasn't just him being poetic. This was a diagnosis. Think about it. World War I had just ended, the Russian Revolution was in full swing, Ireland was having its own uprisings. He looked around and saw a world that had just completely lost its way. The connection to any kind of authority, any tradition was just gone.
All right, so let's look at Yeats's first answer to all this chaos. And his answer was to stare right into that abyss and basically predict what he saw coming next. This is Yeats the visionary, the prophet of anarchy. And his poem, The Second Coming, is his absolutely terrifying vision.
Now, to really get this poem, you have to understand this core idea he had called the gyre. Imagine a spinning top. For Yeats, all of history moves in these giant 2,000-year spirals, or gyres. So in his mind, the Christian era was one of these gyres. It had been spinning for 2,000 years, but by 1919, it was starting to wobble. The spiral was getting wider, and it was about to just fly apart. And that would make room for a totally new and completely opposite reality to spin up.
I know, it's a pretty abstract idea, but a great way to wrap your head around it is to compare it to the Hindu concept of the yugas, right? Just like the Kali Yuga represents the end of a whole cosmic cycle, a time of chaos and things breaking down, Yeats saw his own time as that exact moment, that messy, chaotic transition right before some new, terrifying age began.
And he makes this feeling of total collapse so real with his imagery. I mean, you can almost feel the dizziness of that widening gyre. You can hear that broken connection when the falcon cannot hear its master. You can see the blood-dimmed tide washing over everything good. And then, bam, all that chaotic motion just freezes on this horrifying still image of a beast with a gaze blank and pitiless. It's like a full-on sensory attack.
So this is the crucial part. Where does this nightmare vision of a beast even come from? For Yeats, it is not from the Bible. It's not coming from heaven or hell. It's bubbling up from what he called the spiritus mundi, the spirit of the world. The best way to think of it is like a collective hard drive of all human memory, all our myths. It's primal, it's pagan. This isn't a religious prophecy. It's something way older and way more indifferent to us. And then the poem just ends with this haunting, totally unanswered question. This new force, this rough beast, isn't marching in triumphantly. It's slouching toward Bethlehem, the very birthplace of the order it's about to destroy. It just leaves you with this deep sense of dread, of not knowing. It's the perfect snapshot of a world just holding its breath. Okay, so after that earth-shattering prophecy, Yeats does a complete 180, because for every prophet, there's an opposite hiding inside. Faced with the exact same global catastrophe, Yeats gives us a second and really startlingly different answer, a deliberate, calculated retreat into silence.
This line is from another poem, On Being Asked for a War Poem. And wow, talk about whiplash. After the apocalyptic thunder of the Second Coming, we get this. A quiet, almost arrogant refusal to even get involved. So what's going on here? Did he just give up? Or is this some other kind of statement?
Well, Yeats lays out his argument pretty clearly. First, he says poetry is not rhetoric. Art shouldn't be a weapon for politicians to use. Second, he separates the eternal from the temporary. A poet's real job, he says, is to focus on timeless things, like the beauty of a young girl, not get dragged into the messy, passing squabbles of war. You could almost call it the poet's dharma, their specific duty in the world, which is totally different from a soldier's duty.
And this right here, this brings us to the core conflict. Should an artist be a detached observer, protecting the purity of their art from all the ugliness in the world? Or do they have a duty to be an active witness, to report back from the front lines of what it means to be human, no matter how ugly it gets?
But of course, there's a huge counter-argument to Yeats' position. Is it even possible to be apolitical? Choosing to be silent, choosing to look away when people are suffering, that's not a neutral choice. A lot of people would say that silence is a political act all by itself, one that basically gives a thumbs up to the way things are. And this conflict becomes crystal clear when you put Yeats side by side with a poet like Wilfred Owen, who actually fought and died in World War I. Just look at this breakdown. For Yeats, the poet keeps beauty safe and avoids meddling. For Owen, the poet is a witness whose job is to tell the hard truth, to speak the pity of war. Their imagery, their tone, their entire reason for making art, they're polar opposites.
Really, it all boils down to this one powerful difference. In his silence, Yeats was trying to protect art, with a capital A. But in his graphic, horrifying poems, Wilfred Owen was trying to protect the human, with a capital H, by forcing us all to look.
So, why does any of this from 100 years ago still matter? Well, because Yeats isn't some dusty poet on a shelf. His anxieties feel incredibly familiar. His vision of a world where the center cannot hold feels like he's describing our world right now. It seems that old gyre is always turning.
Honestly, reading Yeats in the 21st century feels less like a history assignment and more like you're reading a commentary on the morning's news. His work gives us a vocabulary for the chaos, that feeling of losing control, the breakdown of authority that we see everywhere.
And get this, take a look at this modern poem called The Neural Gyre, written in Yeats's style. It just swaps out the falcon and the falconer for a chatbot and a prompt writer. It perfectly captures that exact same feeling of a system spiraling out of control, where the thing that was created can no longer hear its creator. The parallel here is just direct and, frankly, chilling. Yeats was terrified of a world losing its moral compass after the horrors of industrial war. Our fear today? It's of a world losing its grip on objective truth itself, in an age of AI, deepfakes, and rampant misinformation. The falcon cannot hear the falconer. The chatbot cannot hear the prompt writer. The center, well, it cannot hold.
And so we're left right back with Yeats's question, just tweaked for our own moment. As our old world, our old way of knowing things starts to wobble and fall apart, what new kind of intelligence, what rough beast that we ourselves are creating is right now slouching toward the future, waiting to be born? It's a question Yeats asked a century ago, and now it's a question we have to answer.